I believe we have with us on the line Eric Lindrum. He is a columnist for AM Greatness. Also, you can check him out at the Right Take Podcast or Right Take Pod, I believe it is, on X. All right, Eric, you were on last week. I think it was Thursday that you were on. Look at that. Look at that raucous applause for you, Eric. I never get this. I never get this kind of love. I'm starting to wonder. I'm starting to wonder if the staff is racist, Eric. I'm just being no. All right. So anyway, listen. All right. So we were talking about this last week. Basically, will Biden stay or will he go? Man, it's been a heck of a weekend. Biden is out, but he remains in office, despite the fact that we don't know where he is. We don't know what's going on. Give us your take on what transpired yesterday. How shocked were you? Were you shocked at all?
You know, Carl, I believed the press reports up to this point, Axios, that just the numerous leaks, the flood, the dam bursting of all these leaks, Axios, Washington Post, these reports, I believed that Biden was gone, but that still didn't make it any less shocking when it happened, Carl. Because, think of this. We hear the word unprecedented a lot, but this, Carl, is quite literally without precedent. In the past, American presidents have chosen not to run for re-election. Lyndon Johnson being the more recent infamous example in 1968. He withdrew after the New Hampshire primary. The majority of the primaries still hadn't happened. Some of the old, Whig presidents way back in the 1800s got thrown out by their parties ahead of their nominating conventions because that's how they did it back then. There were no primaries back then. But never in American history have we had an incumbent president eligible for re-election, wins all the primaries, except for American Samoa, but he won all the other primaries, was the presumptive nominee, and then decide to withdraw with 100 days left before the election. This is historic. It is truly a political earthquake, the likes of which we have never seen before. So I was shocked. I remember when my friends I first got the notification from a friend. I think, Carl, I spent, let me calculate, at least 45 minutes straight just laughing nonstop because I was just so amazed.
Yeah, honestly, listen, it couldn't happen to a better guy. I feel like he definitely got what he deserved. But I got to tell you, I don't think the Democrat Party. Listen, they've lied to us for years. They used the 25th Amendment as leverage to get him out of office, but they were unwilling to invoke the 25th Amendment for the sake of saving the country, but only for the sake of saving the Democratic Party and for saving Democratic elections. It's absolutely sickening to me. So these people have known this. Kamala Harris has been working behind the scenes as well. This is just sickening. What do you think of Kamala Harris? Apparently now what I saw reported earlier that she's at least halfway to this point where it appears as though she will be the nominee. And I'm guessing if polls get bad for her or worse for her, that could change. But right now she seems to be well on her way. What say you, Eric?
Well, I think it's very interesting that, predictable that Biden came right out and endorsed her as the successor because, obviously she's his VP. It would be very conspicuous and very odd if he either didn't endorse her or chose somebody else. And then, you're seeing a number of people fall in line. Gavin Newsom endorsed her, so that takes out one of her big competitors. The Clintons, Bill and Hillary, put out a statement endorsing her. And it seems, the party, the national DNC, all 50 state party chairs have come out in support of her. A lot of delegates have been soft pledged to her, So, none of them hard committed like if she had won the primaries. But, it appears at the moment they're coalescing behind her. There are two opposite major voices that have not supported her, though. One is former President Barack Obama, who issued his statement via his Medium account where he basically called for an open convention. He said, quote, "I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges," end quote. It's basically the George W. Bush gambit at this point for them, Carl. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. You either support Kamala or you don't support Kamala. So by his silence, by not endorsing her, he's basically signaling he does not support her either. And then another one, the other big voice that is anti-Kamala, surprisingly, Breitbart reported on this, the New York Times editorial board. They released an article saying, among other things, quote, they said, "Nonetheless, party delegates should have a voice in the decision of this consequence. There are other qualified Democrats who could take on Trump and win, and picking a candidate without a real contest is how the party got into a position of anointing a standard bearer that large majorities of Democrats and independents had profound concerns about, end quote. That's the New York Times. So there are at least several prominent voices that can see the writing on the wall that she's not as popular. I mean, polling shows she does even worse against Trump than Biden did. Think about that, Carl. She polled worse than the literally senile guy. So what I think it is, Carl, is this is a 1-month trial period for Kamala. She has her chance to go out there and make a name for herself,
right,
be under the spotlight, and prove if she's up to the task. And, as of right now where we sit, yeah, it seems like they're all united behind her. She'll be the nominee. But, Carl, 48 hours ago, a lot of people didn't think Biden would step down, but he did. So with a month to go before their convention in August from the 19th to the 22nd in Chicago, anything could happen. So this is her chance to prove herself to the party bosses. And right out the gate, again, at least one big figure, Obama, thinks she is not up to it. So that's got to count for something.
I wondered about that, and I wondered about the intra-party fighting, I believe, is happening between the Obamas and Clintons. I could be wrong, but it seems to me they came out and endorsed her right away, which was a little surprising to me. I got to be honest with you, Eric. And then the fact that he didn't, obviously the speculation, well, he's just keeping his powder dry because he doesn't want to be attached to her in the event that she doesn't become the nominee. But I also wonder, just like you said, does he know something that we don't? I mean, what he said about Joe Biden in the past, I mean, he wouldn't endorse Joe Biden because he knew Joe Biden was a disaster. So perhaps Barack Obama knows something that the rest of the media or Democrats are unwilling to share.
Absolutely. There's a lot to be said about Obama when it comes to compare him to all the other big leaders of the party today, Schumer, Pelosi, Jeffries, formerly but the erstwhile leader Biden. Obama has probably the sharpest political instincts out of all of them. Remember, he was not supposed to be the nominee in 2008. It was supposed to be Hillary, but he was this young upstart guy who basically, as far as the party bosses are concerned, he cut in line and took the nomination that was supposed to be Hillary's, but he ended up winning anyway. He was very charismatic. He won a pretty sizable landslide. So I think he knows that there are problems with Kamala that even he didn't have. Obviously, it's not a matter of racism. America had no problem electing a black president, but there's something just unlikable about Kamala. That annoying voice, the smug attitude, that awkward cackling laugh that doesn't fit whenever she uses it. She uses it randomly. Obama was charismatic. He was a good speaker, high energy, likable enough. And I think he knows that. He has that self-awareness that he knows she does not have the fire and the strength that he has. So I think the only issue for Obama is, he knows she's not electable. She's got that problem. But the problem then, Carl, who can run? Who could they possibly run at this point? Do they parachute in Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer? At this point, it's a question of who is willing to stand up to Kamala. And, Newsom has already said he won't do it. Whitmer said she doesn't want to do it. So he's caught in this rock in the hard place here. Kamala doesn't have what it takes, but their bench is so depleted they don't have anybody who has what it takes right now.
Now, I don't want to get overconfident here, Eric, but let me ask you this. When you see Gavin Newsom, backing out of this, you see, I think I read reports, if I recall correctly, J.B. Pritzker said, I'm out. And this is a guy that could self-fund. Gretchen Whitmer has, come out. They've all come out and endorsed Kamala Harris. Do you think they see this as, okay, this ship is going down. Let's let her sink, and then we're ready to go for 2028. Do you think there's any validity to that? We got a minute, and I'd like to hold you over for another segment if you're available.
Absolutely, I'm available. Yeah, I'm glad. Carl, great minds think alike. You and I are on the same page. I call it the sacrificial lamb theory. I don't want to get confident or complacent or comfortable, but I think the Democrats, they're ruthless, but they're not stupid. They know Trump is the favorite to win after the debate, the energy of his Vance pick, and especially after the assassination attempt. They know that all they can do now is cut their losses and run a total, sacrificial lamb like Kamala and whoever VP is to go up against Trump, go into that political meat grinder, and then they strengthen up their bench ahead of 2028. That's my theory. But again, still we should campaign for Trump as if he's 10 points down anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I do not want conservatives to get lazy. I look at this story, obviously, with Joe Biden taking all of the oxygen out of the air when it comes to the RNC convention, plus Trump having his first rally since the assassination attempt in Michigan. And I'm like, man, no one's talking about it. I got to make sure that I do. Anyway, guys, listen, this is the Officer Tatum Show. My name is Carl Jackson. We will be back in a sec with our guest, Eric Lindrum. I'm joined by my guest, Eric Lindrum of AM Greatness. AM Greatness, check out his columns there. I think the guy writes about 100 articles a day. It's insane. But anyway, he does some great writing, very informative. So make sure you check him out at AM Greatness. Also, check out his podcast, the Right Take Podcast. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but you can find it on X. Is it at Right Take Pod?
It is at the Right Take Pod on X.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So at the Right Take Pod, guys, we got some really, it gives me hope, honestly. A gentleman like Eric Lindrum, you got some young conservatives as well. Writing for the Federalist, and I read some of the work of these guys, and I'm like, good Lord, I don't know if they were just born with the Constitution in their hands or what's going on here. But I'm glad to have them. I'm glad to have them on our side and fighting for freedom, and it gives me a little bit of hope for the future of America. You know, I want to make sure America is a better place than I left it, Lord willing, and certainly by putting young guys like Eric Lindrum, giving them a platform. I think that certainly helps, because hopefully more young people will learn to appreciate and love America and fight for American greatness, as a matter of fact. So, all right, so let's get back to this conversation. Kamala Harris, she listen, I think you said it perfectly. This is potentially a trial run for Kamala Harris. They'll see how she does. But I want to share this with you, and Lou reminded me of this here. Eric, there's a major donor right here in the Central Florida area, an attorney. I mean, the guy's a gazillionaire, by the name of John Morgan. He's funding this Amendment 3, weed stuff out here. But anyway, he flatly came out, and I mean, he always has these parties, fundraising parties out here for, he had it for Barack Obama, had it for Joe Biden. He said he's not going to be doing that for Kamala Harris. It's a waste of money. I mean, so this is a major Democratic fundraiser in Florida that's saying, I'm not wasting money there. And also, I want to get your response to that. But also, apparently, she's raised $81 million in 24 hours. Is that, Eric, do you know if that's just that $90 million that was unfrozen that is starting to be unleashed? You know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. That theory does make sense. Imagine, she must be such a great campaigner, Carl, to have made $81 million in 24 hours without even actually campaigning. No, I think 100% they are just happy to be rid of Biden. They've gotten rid of one problem. They cut one head off the Hydra, but now there's another head to deal with. So I think, and you mentioned that one donor in Florida, and as we said before, the New York Times and Obama and a few others have voiced concerns about her. I think what it is people, they generally like the idea of Kamala Harris on paper. First black woman president. Wow, first Asian American descent. So many first right. Milestones, because they're obsessed with diversity milestones. But once, and because she's been in the background for the last 3 years, she has not been on the spotlight because she's been vice president. Once she is finally put under the spotlight, she's on the main stage. She doesn't have to hide behind Biden anymore. They see the reality of who she is, and she falls apart. Remember, she was one of the 572 candidates who ran for the Democrat nomination in 2020, and for a little while, she was seen as a front runner. She had that debate famously where she just went after Joe Biden, no holds barred, called him a racist, said, "Oh, you supported segregation and busing," and I was one of those little girls. Her poll numbers skyrocketed. People thought, the Democrat trust fund class really thought it was going to be her. Then the very next debate, Carl, do you remember a little someone who came along and basically ended Kamala's campaign Gabbard. By the name of
Tap That Booty.
Gabbard. In not even 5 minutes, she deconstructed Harris's, career on you locked up a ton of black men in California for weed, and then you joked about smoking weed on a podcast interview, and just very calmly and eloquently deconstructed the myth of Harris. And I'll never forget that split screen, too, of Tulsi kind of looking at the audience, looking at Harris, and Kamala is just staring dead straight into the camera, just like, who does this think she is? Like, so if you get beaten by Tulsi Gabbard, which is she did it effortlessly. Kamala is not going to stand going up against Donald Trump or stand all the scrutiny of the mainstream media and certainly conservative media. So I think they know, like I said, the trial period, it's very likely she could also crash and burn before the convention in August. And it's just a matter of holding out and waiting to see what happens. Like you said, not tying themselves to her name in the event that she fails. But again, knowing there's really not a lot of people on that bench who could run, or at the very least, people who could run and be good candidates like Newsom or Whitmer. Do they want to risk ending their political careers prematurely by just getting destroyed by Donald Trump in November? So, and again, that's where it comes down to either do they still want to win, or do they know that their goose is cooked and they're just going to throw Kamala and whoever her VP is, Buttigieg, Pritzker, maybe Roy Cooper, North Carolina, and just throwing them into a meat grinder and then come back 4 years later and try to be J.D. Vance when he's the nominee.
And this is, and I want to get your response to this. We only have 2.5 minutes left, and I have a couple more questions that I want to ask you. But I think now, after the Trump assassination attempt, I think her best pick, if she is to become the nominee, would be Josh Shapiro. But Eric, he's Jewish, and they have a problem with Jews apparently in the Democrat Party. And I believe that Josh Shapiro raised his profile tremendously in the way that he handled. I got to give him credit as a Democrat that Trump assassination attempt, at least in the media.
Absolutely, and he won a landslide election to his election as governor in 2022, whereas the Senate race that same year was much closer, Dr. Oz versus Fetterman. And yeah, as you said, he's Jewish. I mean, he is the governor of Pennsylvania. He's very popular. It could help in that state, but then you turn around and you basically throw away Michigan and Minnesota because you have all those Muslims there. Remember, in the Michigan primary, over 100,000 voted uncommitted against Biden, and that was purely due to his handling of the war in Israel. And you can see similar sentiment in Minnesota. So they already are mad at the Democratic Party for that handling of Israel. So then for them to turn around and say, oh, and we're putting a Jewish person as our running mate, all those Muslims are going to, with a literally religious fervor, say, no, we will not vote for this ticket if their mortal enemy is on that presidential ticket.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. We only have a minute left. But Eric, listen, this is why one of the reasons I say I don't want Republicans to get lazy. We don't know who Trump is going to be going against. I mean, likely it's Kamala. This makes it very difficult when it comes to ad buy, radio, television, so on, et cetera. Do you just handle this going forward, at least until we know, just spending money, knocking her, or policies, or tying her to Biden? What do they do? 30 seconds left.
For the next month, just continue hammering Biden's record because that is still her record as well. She's part of this administration. The poor economy, the disastrous foreign wars, everything else, assuming we don't know who the nominee is, Trump should continue with that post-assassination attempt message of unity, of a changed man who came within a quarter of an inch of death and saying, I took a bullet for democracy. That's what he said at his Michigan rally, and I'm running to be a president for all Americans, regardless of party.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Check him out. His name is Eric Lindrum. You can check him out at amgreatness.com. Also check out his podcast, The Right Take Podcast, or on X at The Right Take Pod. Eric, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate your brain. All right. This is Carl Jackson. We'll be back in a few.